James's eldest daughter, child, and so somewhere here is Russell. He's at the back, and he's there with his son Alex, so James's grandson, and I have a daughter around here. Oh, there she is. There's Mariella and my wife Marlies, and James's sisters are here. There's Lynn and Carol, and there's numerous first cousins that I'd love to list. Oh, there's Carol. Hey, Carol, nice to see you. And so I'm going to list all of them. I'm just kidding. I'd love to list all of them, but probably don't even know all their names. No, just kidding. But I'd like to mention Heidi and Mike, and thank you for coming from the West Coast today. So, I think I'm almost done. Yeah, I'd just like to welcome Cindy to come and say some words about my father, and thanks again.
I wrote a eulogy or started, but I didn't finish, so this could be not so good, but that's the way. Oh. Okay, if you can't hear me, just yell and I can turn up the volume. So, as Chris said, my brothers and I welcome you, and my dad's sisters are here, and other cousins, and I'm just going to start. This is a celebration of his life. He either wanted, in his will, he either wanted a small church service or a hall party. So anybody who knows my dad knows that he really wanted a hall party. Because he was a shy guy. No, he wasn't. So my dad was born on April 6th. This is his birthday. He was born in 1936, and he passed this January, January 14th. He passed peacefully in his bed, which is kind of surprising because I thought he would pass doing something needlessly dangerous with chainsaws. There would be a chainsaw. And at least one of me and one of my brothers, at least one would be there to witness it, requiring many years of trauma therapy. So I'm glad he died so peacefully, for obvious reasons. I'm going to talk about my dad was a very curious child, which I knew could be problematic for his parents. It was a different time, but my dad as a 4-year-old got in trouble for this. This is absolutely astounding. So my grandfather left a loaded gun, shot the kitchen, and my dad shot the fridge. He was very curious, always getting into things. So, you shouldn't be anything like that around. My dad also learned how, there's a bunch of Westmountians here, this neighborhood is Westmount, and the old houses have screen doors, and at the top of the screen doors is this kind of thing that keeps the door shut. It's on a spring. My dad figured out how to flip it so you lock people in their houses, and he went around as a child and did that to a bunch of the neighborhood houses. And he told me he taught my cousin Michael, because Michael is, Michael was older than us. I don't know if Michael remembers this, probably not, to do it, and that Michael did it to my mom. So he wasn't the best influence always. And and so he did a lot of dangerous things. There's lots of stories of him blowing up things by blowing up chemicals. There was a story about a jug of napalm under a bed. Not his bed. That's good. The other thing I knew about my dad is that even as a child, he swore a lot. He said that anybody who knows Jim knows that I got my potty mouth from him. And he told me that his mother had tried to curb him of that by washing his mouth out with soap. And anybody who knows him knows how well that worked.
Maybe he just likes soap.
Oh, he just likes it. He loved his younger sisters. He loved fixing radios. And he, as a kid, as a kid still, my dad as a child went deaf, but as children will do, they adapt and they learn to lip read, and it happened slowly. His tapes collapsed in his ears, and so he was in one of the first classes at the Alberta School for the Deaf. He got hearing back in one ear, and also he started smoking a pipe at 14. He was in a play where he played grandfather and thought it needed a pipe and started smoking at 14. And he loved math. So my dad went to university to become an engineer. I think he always knew he was going to be an electrical engineer. His father was a telephone man, and it seems that my dad also was influenced by that because he went into electrical engineering, but he specialized in telecommunications engineering. And he had lots of fun. In university, he met my mom, and they did get married, so that's good. And we're the product of that. Not that you need to know. I actually don't want to think about that. Oh shit! Sorry. I think my cousin Mike is going to come up and fix the slideshow. Which I just read. Okay. So I stopped writing this as I was writing this as a chronology, but I decided to stop doing that because I think what I would like to do is talk about my dad as about the different aspects of his life. My dad was a resident of Westmount. He grew up in Inglewood, which is the neighborhood just there. And his father grew up in Westmount, or when once I got to Canada, he spent the rest of his childhood in Westmount. I'm seeing some people nodding, relatives, thank you. And then, so when he got married, for those of you who live in Westmount or know Westmount, eventually after they lived by the university, then they moved back to Westmount, and they lived in two of the little houses. So if you go down 108th Avenue, you can see this row of little tiny houses, and my parents lived in one and then the other, and then they bought their house a couple houses down, and he lived in that until he went to go live at Chartwell and Breezeball. And so generation West Mountain. My attempts to escape have all failed, so I'm not living in Rome.
Okay, so I'm going to say something about my grandfather too, because my grandfather had an effect. I can see some things that my dad did and my grandfather. So my grandfather really liked planes. So when my dad was little, he and a group of friends built, or a group of people built, the first home-built plane in Alberta or Edmonton or something like that. It was something. And they built it in a house in Westmount. And they built it in the basement. And they couldn't get it out of the basement. They did not take the plane apart and reassemble it outside. They excavated the basement wall, tore it down to make it big enough. And when I think about my dad, that is really, that's something. Some of these pictures you'll see of my dad with planes. He was at the airfield when he was a toddler, so he had been around planes a lot, and he loved planes. And apparently, my dad passed that on to Russell, who also is building a plane, but not in his basement. Thank God. I mean, I don't live with him, so I don't know if he wants to dig up his basement, but he seems to be a bit more practical than my dad and my grandfather at where to build things, so that's good. This. Okay. I think anybody who knows Jim well knows that my dad was very forgetful, very absent-minded, sometimes forgot you were in the room, and he often had a lot of rage. And I phoned up my Aunt Lynn, his little sister, one time and was saying, Dad yells a lot. What is he? And she said he was like that all his life. And he used to drive her, he was made to drive her to school, which was Rochep, and before he went to university, drop his sister off. But he would often forget that she was in the car. And if you forget, and you basically have to go to the university to turn around and come back to the high school. And so when he missed the high school, she'd go, you're supposed to go to the high school. And my dad, of course, would scream, why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you remind me that we needed to turn off? But if she reminded him the next time, he would go, I know. And you can see my sister-in-law, she's kind of laughing because my brother does the same thing. He was very forgetful, he was very absent-minded, and he often forgot us. If he was left to babysit without my mother's supervision, things could happen. He once left me and my brother Russell. Chris had just been born, so we're toddlers. He left me and my toddler brother Russell in the bathtub. And, I guess I watched my mom bathe Chris. So I guess I put Russell in the hand sink and turned on the hot water and just scalded the hell out of it. And he more dangerous if you leave the basement door open. Chris had thrown down those stairs. So that happened. And then there was one time we were up at the cabin. We had a cabin, he loved the cabin. And he was cutting wood for some friends, and he forgot he had a very like 4-year-old Chris, and he brought the chainsaw back, nipped Chris's face, like it was like, yeah, and you know that's pretty scary. And then my brother was throwing stones up in the air, and I guess my dad's just watching this, and of course one hits him. So we went for dinner with all the grandparents, came straight from the camping trip, met my mom and the grandparents at some hotel dining room, and we're filthy because Dad didn't think to wash us. And Russell's got a big bump on his forehead, and Chris has got a nick on his face that was a dimple. So, you know, we really had to practice survival skills. It was fast. My colleague, I was telling her some of these stories, and she said, "Oh, no wonder you guys are smart. You had to be to survive." So that could be funny, I guess. What else? My dad was famous for his laugh. And my dad took us on sabbaticals. So when he had a sabbatical, he wouldn't just leave the country and leave his family at home. He would bring all of us to England too. So we lived there, and I forgot where I was going to go with this, but it was going to be hilarious. Oh, I know. So we met a bunch of friends in the 80s when we were going to various different forms of high school there, and those kids became quite good friends. And when my dad was there, you know, getting his thesis in a form that could be accepted by the university, a bunch of our friends were over numbering pages and doing checking, spell checking. We were in Canada, like he'd gone back to do this, and my mom was working with all these kids getting his master's thesis prepared. And so I remember visiting them later in the summer, and there's kids that I'd never met before would do the gym laugh, like I'm Jim's daughter, so if anybody, I said I would do it. That Jim was very famous for that laugh. If he was in a crowd, you knew. I have friends, Myron Dorsey, they read a movie or play, and they told me later, "Oh, your dad was at that play." Yeah, because you could hear him everywhere. He couldn't hear very well, so he made up for what he couldn't hear by being really loud. And his problems hearing led to some very interesting situations, because our phone was in the kitchen where everybody was, and you couldn't talk on the phone because Dad was always right beside you. And it's not that I was trying to hide anything from him, it's that he would eavesdrop, and he would just, you were trying to have two conversations. Because you go, "Well, let's go see Doug," and my dad would say, "What are you doing with," and you know, if I said that, my dad would go, "What are you doing with Doug? With the dog?" I'm like, "I'm not doing anything with the dog. I'm going to go see Doug at the university." Well, you can't bring the dog to the university. And you're on the phone, right? But this would go on for a long time, where we would be like trying to have a conversation with my dad's help. I know there was something more about the laugh, because it was quite terrifying. I'm looking at these is if I can read them. So, if my dad was sent to do something and he got distracted, he would lose him. And one of the things my dad was also known for was his pipe smoking. Then lots of friends would say, "Oh, I just love your dad's pipe smoke smell." And we'd be like, yeah, you wouldn't love it if you'd be hotboxed in the car for 12 hours. So my brothers and I have a different take on the pipe smoke. But there is actually pipes, and Jim's tobacco. Jim went to one place to get his tobacco for many, many years, from the 80s, I think. And it started in Westmount Mall, and they did their own, like my dad had his own blend, like they did their own blends. And my dad did a lot of things with, did things with them, visited with them. And I remember there was some family party happening, and my dad was sent to go get floor cleaner. And, we didn't have cell phones. And we waited, and we waited, and we waited. And then we called Burlington's tobacco shop and said, and my mom said, "Is Jim there?" And we passed it to Jim, and I could just hear my dad go, "Oh," I'm like, "Yeah, oh yeah, you wouldn't believe what Bobby heard." But like we're watching, like we have people coming over in 20 minutes, and my dad's at Burlington smoking because he forgot. So that wasn't as funny as I thought it'd be. My dad was also quite famous. My dad was also well known for his sartorial choices. Not just once, but several times, my dad's meals had been paid for because people thought he was homeless. I'm not lying. Yeah. My dad had several, if you knew, my dad had some loves that he was known by as well, that everybody knew he had. And one of his loves was his four-wheel drives. One was an orange Bronco, which had been in car accidents and all sorts of things, and it was very hard. It didn't have power steering, and it was really hard to drive. So my mom made him get something else, and we had a minivan, and then he had a Land Rover. But of course he's forgetful and forgets what he's doing. So he's in his Bronco, and this is the 70s, and he was involved in Westmount community, and they were dropping off newsletters, and two kids were having a fight over. He dropped them off where they were supposed to, deliver newsletters, and the two kids were having a fight over which did which side. And my dad, instead of watching the road, was looking out the car, the Bronco, and yelling at them, and watching them while driving onto 124, which was a main street, and crashed and really broke a city bus. This is probably not so funny, but my friend Karen called me to say, "I think your dad's shouldn't be driving because he almost hit the city bus I was in with his Land Rover." So several decades apart, he was doing that. He had a big winch on the Land Rover, and we were at the cabin, and some guy was stuck, and my dad winched him out, and it was the mechanic that was fixing the city bus, so that, kind of circular. My dad also loved dogs. You'll see pictures of various dogs up here.
There's Flicka and Penny from his childhood. I think Gidget's in there, my grandparents' dog, and his own dogs, Boo Boo, Juno, and were dogs we had in childhood. And Boo Boo was a Terrier X, and Juno was a Bouvier, and it was the biggest dog we'd ever seen. And we didn't know what it was. They weren't very common at the time. But when we were kids, the neighbors had a Bouvier, and they went to my parents. They went to visit my parents one night, as you do in the 70s, while we ran feral in the streets. And they brought over a Bouvier and 2 bottles of wine. And in the morning, the wine was gone, but the Bouvier wasn't. And that was Juno. It was a breeding dog that could no longer breed, so my parents ended up with Juno. And Juno was probably 80 pounds. But every time my dad talked about her, she got bigger and bigger until she got to about 150 pounds. And yeah, so he loved that dog. And then he got Nicky, who was a dog who was my cousin's gave him Nicky, and he loved that dog. And I remember he told me he had emphysema, and I said, "Are you scared?" And he was like, "Yeah, I'm really scared." And I said, "Well, maybe you should stop smoking." He's like, "Why?" And because you're scared of the emphysema. "Oh no, I'm afraid because Nikki's having a vet appointment tomorrow, and I hope she's going to be okay." But I knew I could always drop my dog off at Dad's place. The very last dog he had was a Mexican street dog that bit half the neighborhood. He was known, and you could see him walking all around the neighborhood with Julie. Julie had a mask on, so we called him Doggable Lecter. And he was a street dog that a wharf had brought in from Mexico, and we ended up with him. And my dad loved that dog, loved that dog. I remember once he would bring the dog to be babysat at my place if he was going out. And one time my brother, the practical brother, was helping me take things to the Eco Center with his son, Alex. And we were all in the car, and Russell said, "Why do you have Dad's dog?" And I said, "I'm babysitting." And I said, "Babysitting a dog?" And I said, "Listen, Russell, Dad's probably rewrote his will and is giving everything to the dog. And so we have to be nice to it." And Russ, Alex's son, started laughing, but Russ was kind of like, 50-50. Which is kind of true. When he was in the home, he loved having visits from my dog and Chris's dog. He really loved to see those dogs, kind of more than us, but that's okay too. Yeah, and it was nice to be able to bring them to him. I'm trying to think of something I've missed. What else did he love? He made everybody either take a certificate, all the family members take a certificate in some sort of science, or take a certificate in a trade, or get a degree in some sort of science or math. So my brother became a mathematician. My brother took a certificate in aeronautical engineering. My cousin, Mike, did electrical engineering, and I didn't. And at the time, I started university. I said I was going to be a historian. I wanted to be a historian. And I was arguing one day. My dad said, "You're going to be a lawyer. I know you're going to be a lawyer." And I said, "Oh God, I'm not going to be one of those weasels. What do you call 100 lawyers at the bottom of the sea?
a good start. Yeah, Dad, I'm a lawyer. I took law, I dropped out and I took law. Like, yeah. So he was right and I was wrong. And I guess he did know his kids pretty well. And I'm gonna shut up because winging it is hard. I know there's some people here who want to tell a story or two, and we do have one of my dad. I said I would start with one of my dad's, a very old friend of my dad's, Sam Bassi, because he was a university friend, and yeah, I'm gonna start with him, and then if you want to tell a story about Jim, please come up and tell a story. We actually have a video somewhere of my dad almost killing us. We were adults at that time with trees, where he'd take down 100-foot aspen, and we had to run to get out of the way. He also did it to my cousin as well. So, you know, we all survived, despite my dad. But I think he would have loved being here. He would have loved seeing everybody. And he loved to party. He loved to tell stories. And yeah, I think he would be so happy to see all your faces. And you would hear from somewhere in the room. Ready? Ready? The knee slap is essential.